A very unremarkable pasuk is found in this week's Sedra. Vayas Betzalel es ha'aron atzei shitim. And Betzalel crafted the Aron out of acacia wood. Not much to notice here, except there's everything to notice here. The pasuk is problematic and remarkable in two ways. Number one, it's the only one of the Kalim in the Mishkan that is attributed to one particular person. All the other Kalim, it says, Vayas this, Vayas that, they made this, they made that. But when it comes to the Aron, when it comes to crafting the ark, Vayas Betzalel, it is specifically attributed to Betzalel's handiwork. Furthermore, when we go back to Truma, when the command for building the for constructing the Aron is originally made, the pasuk says, "V'asu Aron atzei shitim," and you plural shall make the Aron out of acacia wood. All the other kalim in the Mishkan are ve'asisa this, ve'asisa that, and you singular shall make this. You singular shall make that. The shulchan, the menorah. But when it comes to the Aron, ve'asu in plural, you plural shall make it. And the Medrash comments, the reason for this is to teach us hakol chayavin. When it comes to the menorah, when it comes to the shulchan and other kalim in the Mishkan, so ba'asisa, you shall make this, you shall make that. But when it comes to the Aron, which holds the Torah, which holds the luchos, the asu, you plural, meaning hakol chayavin. Everyone has an obligation to craft the Aron. Why? Because of kavod Torah. Everyone has a responsibility to show honor and dignity and respect to the Torah. And that's why it says, Va'asu, you plural, shall make the Aron. So back in Truma, the Medrash tells us that everyone, hakol chayav, and everyone has a responsibility to craft the Aron. And now, when the Aron is actually made, it's attributed to one individual and one individual only, Betzalel. So this innocuous and somewhat unremarkable pasuk is actually very remarkable and problematic in the ways that I've just outlined. So how do we understand Vayas Betzalel es Aron atzei shitim? Betzalel made the Aron. So Rashi tells us that Nasa Nafsho, that Betzalel put his full heart and soul, he totally invested himself into the crafting of the Aron, and to memorialize his particular involvement and his absolute and total commitment and personal investiture into the crafting of the Aron, he gets his name associated with it. Vayas Betzalel es Aron atzei shitim. Vidaz Zakenim, Mibalei Tosfos, also citing a Medrash, says that when Betzalel's name is mentioned with the Aron because it reminds us or recalls and memorializes the following incident, the following story. There was a dispute, says the Midrash, between Moshe and Betzalel. Should the Aron be crafted and then the house of the Mishkan come after that, or should the house be crafted and then the Aron be made afterwards? And so Betzalel says to him, well, Moshe, you have to build the house first and then the Aron. And Moshe said, what do you mean you have to build the Aron and then the house? And then Betzalel reminds him, what was it that Hashem actually commanded you, Moshe? And Moshe remembers, Betzalel, you're right. It's as though you were there. Bitzel Kel. It is as though you were standing in the shadow of Hashem. You intuited, you understood, you knew what was the right thing to do. And so Betzalel is associated with the crafting of the Aron in order to recall this amazing and extraordinary event. It's amazing in a couple of ways, because one, it indicates and shows the power and the centrality, I should say, of humility when it comes to Torah, when it comes to observing Torah, when it comes to learning Torah, when it comes to teaching Torah, when it comes to the ethos of the Torah. Humility is the guiding factor. Moshe, the pasuk associates the Aron with Betzalel to recall this incident, an incident which is really all about humility. Moshe had to be humble in the face of Aron, his lesser equal. I mean, equal but lesser. Moshe is the greatest Navi. Moshe knew the Torah from Hashem. And yet Betzalel was able to add something, to correct something, to give insight to Moshe that Moshe had apparently forgotten. So Vayas Betzalel Aron, the reason why Betzalel's name is associated with the Aron is to tell us about the importance and centrality of humility when engaging a life of Torah. Rabbi Abraham J. Twersky cites a beautiful and powerful idea from Rav Baruch Sorotskin. And it's something that I think that we all know and we all understand from our daily life, but it is an important and profound idea, regardless of how commonplace it might be. This is the notion of diffusion of responsibility. There's a psychological phenomenon called diffusion of responsibility, also properly known as the bystander effect, which is that the more people there are present when a responsibility is delegated, the less likely it is for any one person to feel that responsibility rests on their own shoulders. Right? So if you have 100 people in a room and God forbid somebody passes out, the likelihood that any one person is going to step forward to help the injured party is less than if it's just me and the injured party. Then I feel the weight on my shoulder. So the more people there are present, there is a sense of diffusion of responsibility, known as the bystander effect, which we're all familiar with. Says Rav Sorotskin that when it comes to the Aron, the pasuk says ve'asu Aron atzei shitim. You plural, hakol chayavin, says the Medrash. Everybody has a responsibility to kavod Torah. Everybody has a responsibility to the Aron. You know what was extraordinary about Betzalel? Betzalel heard what everybody else heard, but he assumed the responsibility himself. Hakol chayavin, everybody is responsible. And as we all know, when everybody is responsible, nobody feels responsible. But the greatness of Betzalel is that he assumed and he felt that burden himself. Vayas Betzalel es Aron atzei shitim. Betzalel took the responsibility on himself, even though it was hakol chayavin, even though it was a responsibility for everyone. He felt it. As his personal burden, and he did it, and he acted, and he invested himself, and he put himself out there to make it happen. This is what is extraordinary about Betzalel, and that's why Betzalel, Vayas Betzalel, his name gets associated with the Aron. And this, of course, is an important message when it comes to our engagement with Torah, generally speaking. The Torah has many mitzvahs that we have to do, many responsibilities, and sometimes it can feel overwhelming, and sometimes it can just feel maybe it's just somebody else's responsibility. There's so much in there, or maybe I'll just focus on one thing, the other thing. But the truth of the matter is that a life of Torah is a life of achrayus, is a life of responsibility. And when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," love your neighbor as thyself, that's on me. That's on me. I have to feel that responsibility. When the Torah says, as it does in this week's Sedra about Shmira Shabbos, that's not just for Jews. It's for me. It's my responsibility. When the Torah gives us a command and a charge of Talmud Torah, of connecting to Hashem, of taking care of our neighbor, of being responsible for the mitzvahs of kashrus and the mitzvahs of the chagim and the mitzvahs of taking care of the poor and the mitzvahs of visiting the sick, all of those are like general calls out there to Klal Yisrael. This is a mitzvah that you have to do. But my ear has to hear it as my responsibility, because after all, it is. A good Shabbos to all.